everybody talks about, well, the number one thing to relationships or your relationship being successful is communication. And yes, there is a component of that, but what happens when you can't communicate? What happens when you don't know what's going on in your head? When you want to say something, but it's stuck, and it's usually stuck in the throat or in the chest, and it's not coming out.
Morning, everyone. Very happy to see you all, and I would love to introduce another one of our experts, who is a relationship counsellor, a holistic counsellor, and has got quite a lot to say on making your relationships beautiful, including the one with yourself. Welcome, Vanja. How you doing?
Doing good. How are you? Thank you for that.
Man, my pleasure. That's good. I'm good. Thank you. Yeah. Good to have you on.
Yes, I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah. Awesome. So we briefly spoke the other day, Vanja, and I was really interested to hear your take on looking at all of these relationships from the perspective of fixing yourself first. Is that a good place to start?
Yeah, let's start there. When we have relationships, and obviously we notice that there's something wrong when there's conflict, that's a big. And when we talk about community, everybody talks about, well, the number one thing to relationships or your relationship being successful is communication. And yes, there is a component of that, but what happens when you can't communicate? What happens when you don't know what's going on in your head? When you want to say something, but it's stuck, and it's usually stuck in the throat or in the chest, and it's not coming out. We have this idea of communication, but then we kind of forget about the lives we lived and what we were taught and the examples we've had and the traumas we've had. And for me, the number one thing to successful communication is self-awareness, self-growth. If we can focus on the self and focus on the self first, that doesn't mean that we go into the selfish mode where we don't think about the other person. But when there is conflict, when there is something to talk about, even just a feeling that you're getting, if you've been in conflict for a while and you may turn into resentment towards your partner or not knowing them or not understanding them, that we first look within, that we first figure out what's going on inside. What is this trying to tell me? What emotional wound am I being exposed to here? And I am looking to the other person, hoping that if they would change, then somehow everything will be better for me.
Yeah, I love that. That's kind of how a lot of people deal with the entire world. Relationships, friends, politics, you name it. If only they were different, we would be good. And I want to pick up on one thing that you said in all of that around this notion of being selfish, of paying attention to what is going on for you versus, I forget the word you used, but essentially, selfishness.
Yeah. So when we say the word selfish, we obviously all have an idea about what it is. When I'm talking about being selfish is turning to self first and just understanding the self. I hear a lot of people talk about, if I had to choose between my kids and my husband, I would choose this and I would choose that, or with my wife or whatever. And this question boggles me because I have been married, or I've been with my husband for 12 years. We had a 4-year-old. Never in my life had I had to choose between one or the other. And the same way when it comes to our relationship, there is very little decisions that you would have to make where you will have to choose one or the other. The idea of selfish is to take care of yourself, which for many people just does seem like something, well, I don't want to do that because it's only for me. But we need to do that, because if we don't take care of ourselves, how can we take care of anyone else? Only we know, and many of us don't even know that, but only we know what we need. So If we're looking, I mean, my practice is a big self-care of myself. That's how my relationship flourishes. That's how I can, when my husband goes into ego, when I go into ego, how I can step back and self-reflect is because I have, my batteries are full, my love tank is full, my energy tank is full, my passion tank is full. So then I can give to other people, and I can give without expectation, and I can give without selflessly. But I do need to start with me first.
Yeah, beautiful. So it's kind of like we're trying to get ourselves so full up that we're spilling the good stuff out, like the tap's on and the cup's full, and you just keep turning it on, so it's hitting everyone. And
Yeah.
so another question that comes up for me in what you just said is the notion of where do we develop the self-awareness to know when to stop? Because I know a lot of people are required as children or as partners. You get this a lot with women, or you get it with men who are in high pressure jobs, is that required to give and give and give, and developing that awareness of, now, okay, now I've had enough, now I'm going home, is quite a thing, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Because as children, majority of us were brought up into, we have to be something a little bit different. We have to, and I mean, and we live in a society, we do have to fit into the society norms at least a little bit. We have to be considerate of other people, at least a little bit. So I understand the idea behind it, but we certainly, sometimes our parents and our caregivers sometimes took it a little bit too far, where they put us in boxes, which created these emotional wounds, which created these ideas that I'm not enough, I'm not worthy. So I have to keep proving, I have to keep doing more, I have to keep giving more to tell you how worthy I am, to tell you that I am lovable. So we do go into this, and oftentimes also when we are in these jobs that it's constantly go, 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 or we create our life where it's constantly go, 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 we don't have time to think. We like it that way, because if we were to stop and if we were to think, we fear everything would just come crushing down on us. So the more I keep running, the faster I keep running, I keep escaping my feelings. And even if I do stop for a second, I'm sure I'll find something to do. I'm sure I can figure out something to do. And then that's where we start then looking at where we create this world where we start looking at the other person, because it's never me. I'm always doing. So it must be you, because it's not me.
Yeah. So that's a very, I mean, I would call that a spiritual concept, really, to be able to connect with that part of yourself that deeply. And then I wonder what's on the other side of, you know what I mean? Like, you have to face your feelings, you have to, you know, you're running flat chat, and then you stop. Do I have the 8th cup of coffee and read this book, or do I just sit here and contemplate what's really going on? And then what's on the other side of that for most people?
What happens is, so usually, and I've heard a lot of people go through this, and I know that you kind of hit that end. You feel like, okay, I'm done. I can't. I understand that this is one way of living, but surely there must be better. There must be more. As much as we've created the work and wealth around it, it's not enough.
Yeah.
So we have this crush, and we then turn within, and hopefully we turn within, because otherwise we turn to addiction, but hopefully we turn within and we start reflecting. And the best way that we can start reflecting is if we're in an argument with our children or with our partner, or what is it about that situation that made me feel like I need to speak that way to be heard? What is it about that situation that made me raise my voice, that made me swear, that made me do this? Whatever your reaction was, this is where the self-reflection comes in, and this is what it looks like on the other side. And when we start healing, those words no longer trigger us, those actions no longer trigger us. So that's when we can start communicate. This is then when the books come in and they tell us that we need to communicate, we need to handle conflict a certain way, is because we have a handle on our emotions. And that's what, to me, the other side looks like. My focus is always on the self. It's always on I think once I change myself, no, once I heal everything about myself, then I can start focusing on the outside world.
Yeah, okay. So how do you know when that's happened, Vanya?
It's you grow until you die. If you stop growing, you're dead.
Yeah. So essentially what you're saying is just you got to spend the rest of your life focused on yourself.
Yes, yeah. And it gets easier. The first time, as with anything, the first time is the hardest. The first wound is the biggest. It creates the biggest impact, and it's meant to be that way. Otherwise, you wouldn't pay attention. And then after that, it gets easier, and there is less stuff to work through, and you become aware of it at an earlier stage, so it's easier to deal with. But you never, there's always something new to uncover. There's always a new layer to peel.
Yeah. And it is interesting being with somebody else in that space, because I mean, I have to agree with you in terms of focusing on yourself being the most important. And so is it too personal to ask you, is your husband into this stuff too, or does he not at all around focused on any of that stuff?
No, not too personal to ask. So it's funny because before I met my husband, I went into therapy, and I went into holistics, the same type of thing that I do. So it was focused on the spiritual. It was my introduction to the spiritual world, because I knew nothing of it before that. I just knew that I had a lot of trauma, I had a lot of stuff to deal with, I had a lot of side effects. And that's where, I heard somewhere that therapy may work. So here I was on my journey. And after a few therapists, I found this person. And it was only, I think, 3 or 4 years later that I met my husband, and he, same as me, because this isn't something that we grow up with in our community. So he knew nothing of it. And there was a lot of times through our relationship where I would be more focused on self-growth or on spirituality, and he would be a little stagnant. He would be always behind, and then would flip.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of conflict within that, because we could never seem to match up. And if we could, it was very short-lived. It's always the other one that's up there and the other another one's down. And that's where we then, both of us, had to learn to let go of judgment or of expectation, what the other person should be or could be, where we can allow the other person to grow at their own pace. We can certainly encourage them, but not push them. And now I have a little bit more of an understanding. And when I reflected on myself, that 70-80% of that spiritual growth is just thinking about it. It's within, it's trying to make the move. It's figuring out what to do next. When you're on a new path, figuring out and building that trust that as you make each step, it's going to appear, and it's going to appear. So sometimes I see that a lot in relationships, where one person is really on their spiritual growth, and they look at their partner and they're going, but they're not there. So we create a lot of conflict. And just if you observe your partner for a week, no judgment, just observe them, you will actually see how much they're growing, but not maybe in the same area as you are. Maybe they're focusing on something else. Growth is growth.
Love that. Love that. I really relate to the to this, you know, climbing the ladder with your partner, because it's for us, it's been very much a journey of, you know, while this growth is happening, that's where the support is, you know, and that person gets the support, and then the last 12 months we've been growing at the same time, and it's been more challenging.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. But just to acknowledge that both of those are okay if you, I think if you're there to support your partner no matter what, you know, is a beautiful
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. And I mean, this is would be, as humans, we're built for connection. So whether we are within our partner, because it's beautiful to have someone by your side that knows you and understands you. And even if you've been together for decades, there's still a layer of you that's they need to learn, because you don't know that layer.
Yeah.
But to support you, and they really understand what type of support you need, you know, without even you having to say it. And then that's where that communication starts to grow, because you do start opening up and you're able to, because the true idea of communication is being vulnerable. If I can be vulnerable with you, then we can communicate. The problem is most people can't be vulnerable. The moment we start talking, they start putting the defenses up and they start arguing. So that's straight away communication breakdown. But if we can start growing, then we can be vulnerable. Then I can tell you all the things that I know and things that I don't know and things that I'm afraid of. And then you get to know me on a completely different level.
So because this is an interesting point you make, right, about vulnerability, is that there is a shift in that place where we are putting up those defenses all the time to the place where we can actually stop that and just be vulnerable for a minute. So how is it that you, like, how do you help people to go from say there to there, and then let's say that they come to you here not vulnerable, like putting up defense, you're going to get them to vulnerability, and then how do we go from there to actually really thriving and not being scared of that anymore? So, well, I know
no, that's all right. When we are not able to be vulnerable, we're in fear. That's why we put up a mask, we put up our defenses, because we feel stronger this way. It's a better way for me to defend. When we move towards vulnerability, we start building trust in ourselves, in universe. Now, if I can trust myself, it's much easier for me to trust the other person, because I know no matter what they do, that I will be okay. No matter what happens, I can handle it. So the moment that we can start being vulnerable and honest and trusting towards ourselves, so building that self-belief, belief in ourselves, and that comes from knowing that you are enough, knowing that you're worthy. Those are the foundations of that trust within the self. Then it's much easier, or even comes naturally, to be open and vulnerable to the other person, because I may have something to be afraid of, but I also know I can handle it. So fear is not this big, scary monster. It's just there. It's part of me. And if it comes to it, I'll deal with it. But at the same time, I know that I have the tools, that I have the skills, that I have the strength, or whatever I think I'm missing, that I have it, so I can deal with it.
Yeah, beautiful. So in a way, that's the first half of the question, because it gets us to there, I reckon. And I just want to tip on to one thing, which was that I remember going through that myself and finding that place where I discovered, because you say fear is always going to be there, and that is true. And at the same time, we recognize that fear is an illusion,
Yeah.
because when you put it all out there, is if somebody goes, oh no, you're terrible, you're stupid, you're whatever. So, I mean, we're not here for anybody else. We're just here for ourselves. And if that person doesn't get you, it doesn't reflect on you, it reflects on them. So that's an interesting point I wanted to add into that. So then, okay, so let's say whatever, for whatever reason we get rid of the fear, we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Now, how do we go from there in terms of relationship and with your clients? How do we go from there to just fully open to loving no matter what with your clients?
It's a natural progression, because when we can love ourselves without judgment, and because the biggest killer in relationship is judgment, or there's other pillars, but basically it all comes down from judgment and from fear. So once we can handle our own fear and we know what to do with it, and I 100% agree with you that it is an illusion, and we can sit in this mess of unknowing, because as humans we have to put a label on everything. So if we can just be without knowing, or without good or bad, it just is, the natural progression to that bigger connection, the path is already there. Because when we connect within ourselves, then we can connect to the other person. Then that love becomes selfless, and I can give without expecting anything in return. So the work from when we reach vulnerability, true vulnerability, to that deep connection, that's the easy part. That's the easiest part, because now we've started healing. Now we started working within. And if we do have a blockage between where we are and where we want to be, then or if we're having trouble getting there, then there's a blockage. There's something for us to work with. There's a further thing to heal, or a mindset, or something to work with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, but and it also raises another point, which is that that you talked about giving selflessly without wanting anything in return, and I think that as a concept everyone gets because they've heard it, but
Yes.
the actual reality of it is very hey.
Oh yes. um, it is 100% true, because we think that we give without expectation, but we expect, at the very least we expect a thank you, because we are expecting validation, we're expecting praise, we're expecting something. We don't always expect that the person gives back in the same way, or exactly the same way, to us, but we're expecting our ego to be boosted. Because if we're giving with expectation, we're giving from ego. So then the ego wants something in return, because there's never something for nothing. But if we can work through the ego and let go of that, then that's where the true giving without truly expecting anything in return. And I think we all, when we get to our authentic self, or we've all had a glimpse of it, it's usually just a glimpse at some point in our life, where we've just done something, even picked up a piece of paper off the ground, and it was something for nothing. There wasn't anyone around to glorify us. There wasn't anyone around to applaud us. But giving this without expecting nothing is hard, especially in today's social media, and everybody has to put everything on social media and get a little bit of a praise. We're moving away further away from that expectation.
Yeah, and it kind of makes me feel like we've kind of come full circle, in that it's also worth mentioning that it's not picking up a piece of paper off the ground and then giving yourself love for it, like giving yourself.
Yeah.
It's just, it's there, and it's, you know, you see something that's not right or needs fixing or needs giving, and you give, and then you move on without even thinking about it, which is very
Yeah.
yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. And that's about if you, within that moment, if you just keep staying in that present moment, staying in the now, if you're giving yourself love, you are doing it for something in the future. If you are picking it up and then you're going to tell a story about it to your partner, you're doing it again for something in the future. Maintaining yourself in the present moment constantly, because that's where we are. That's where our true essence is. Ego lives either in the past or in the future. It rarely ever sits in the present. So if we can sit in the present, that's where the solution of expectation comes in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the question is, who are most of the people that would need your help? Like, what are the signs? What are the things that people go, you know, obviously lots of people have difficulty in their relationships, lots of people have difficulty with their own relationship with themselves.
Yeah.
What makes them pick up the phone or email or whatever and call you, and what do they ask? How do you know?
I think when you hit that, if you're feeling a little bit lost, whether in your relationship or just within yourself, or you're noticing patterns repeating, again, whether it's within relationships or whether it's within yourself, there's something that keeps showing up for you, and there's these blockages, you can't seem to move forward. And those patterns or blockages could be just constant arguments within relationships, not knowing how to deal with your children, overwhelm of emotion, or those are all the signs that there are emotional wounds that need healing. There's something there that we need to work through. Something has happened, and we haven't dealt with it. And so we just kind of kept going, put a band-aid on it, and we kept moving on. And now it's infested and it's infected and it's just seeping into every area of your life. So something is going wrong. And they say if you've been struggling with it for more than 2 weeks, it's time to start doing things differently. It's time to start looking for help, whether that's reading a self-help book, whether that's listening to a podcast, whether that's seeking someone to help you work through it. But you know that when you are not in joy, when you're not in happiness, when you're not in present moment, if you're living in the past, this is a sign that there is an emotional wound that you've just swept over, or you haven't had a chance to heal, and now it's time to do it.
Yeah, yeah, cool. So what is it that you offer people generally? Like, does it come from, is it all just one-on-one sessions as a therapist, or
Yeah. So we can do one-on-one, which is obviously tailored just for your specific needs, whatever you need in that moment. I'm there to serve. I also offer group sessions, which are, so at the moment, the ones that I'm running are specifically for women. And it's a very small group of women who are working through just what we've been talking about, working through those emotional words, working through their relationships to come to that stage of really honest, true vulnerability and finding their authentic self. And then we do the 20% is that connection and conflict resolution. Because as we said, once we're able to get to that true vulnerability, everything after that is a little smoother, a little easier. And I also have a self-paced course, which is focused on relationships. It's focused on, so either anyone can basically take this course, anyone who's struggling with their relationship. And again, my concept is always the same: focus within, and then we can deal with those 20% in terms of how to communicate better, how to handle conflict better, how to set better boundaries. But it's the focus on healing yourself.
and so for instance, if that's the place to start, how have you what feedback have you got from customers and clients and things who have done that kind of work on themselves?
Um,
I know you can't speak specifically.
yes.
But
Yeah, I won't mention any names, but just running through it, I think it's just a shift of life. It's just people, the feedback that I always get through almost every session when I ask at the end of the session, how are you feeling? Tell me what's going on now. I feel lighter. And a lot of people, the struggles that we carry feels heavy, and it is heavy. So they feel lighter pretty much after every session. After 3 or 4 sessions, I start getting the praise. I am so glad I found you. I am so, it's the thing that I've been needing, but I didn't know that it existed. And especially if you are growing up in a society like I have, and a lot of people I seem to work with, where therapy or self-help, self-growth is all voodoo, and it doesn't exist. It's not for us, not for our people. So, and being able to sit in places and making different decisions. On my website, there is a whole bunch of client feedback, and I sometimes post it on my social media. But what I often hear people is, it's just that gratefulness for me, from me coming to them and from them coming to me, to be able to connect in such a way, to be able to move forward. Those are, to me, that makes my heart sing. It's the most beautiful when I've helped a person go through that. And I have helped so many people come through that. And sometimes I get people who are not ready to do the work, and that's okay. They come back when they are. But it's just that constant praise of, I didn't know this existed, this level of freedom, this level of peace, because I've never experienced it.
sure, sure. Beautiful. Well, I feel like that's a really good encapsulation of Vanya in a nutshell, one of these ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say, if there's anything that stands out in this for people who are listening, that want a better relationship, contact her, pay attention, see what she has to say, and let me leave you with this. Is there anything, Vanya, one tip, one hot tip that you can give people to check in with themselves?
I think that I mentioned this before. When you are in an argument, when you have come, whether it's anger, whether it's crying, whatever the emotion is coming out, think about, what is it about that situation that makes me act this way, or that makes me feel like I need to act this way, that makes me want to raise my voice, or that makes me want to cry. What is it showing me there? That alone will give you great self-awareness. It will really get you on that self-healing journey, because once you open that wound and once you've noticed it, there's no going back. It's always there. Now you know. Now you have to go and deal with it.
Yeah, beautiful. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.